Welcome back to episode 9 of Rational Reality. And in this episode, we're going to be revisiting the theme of housing and sustainability, which we released back on the 25th of June 2020. So it's been a whole year since Glenn and I last had this conversation. But this time, we're going to discuss what's changed since the last time we spoke and how we're now on our journey to become a climate positive contractor, having released our climate action framework. So, welcome back, Glenn. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I actually can't believe it's been a year, and the Euros are actually on now. And yeah, gosh, where's the year gone? I don't know.
Time flies when you're on lockdown.
Yeah,
So we discussed the emergence of COVID and how that had stalled the sustainability agenda. And 1 year on, we wanted to get an idea of what the current reality is, and how we've progressed as a business, our journey. And like I mentioned, with the publishing of the framework. So, what is that current reality from your perspective? And at a high level, how has that low carbon agenda been put back on the agenda, I guess?
yeah. I mean, I did have a quick look at that video that we did last year, and some of the things that we were talking about. And if last year was what I said was obviously COVID and the pandemic had really put it all on the back burner, I think now it's kind of on the afterburners. So it's kind of somebody's really accelerated it this year. That's my experience. I just think it's really coming to the fore again. Um, and I'm not really going to be telling anybody anything they don't know that's in the industry. I'm sure that we're now all experiencing that. So just to give a feel for it, why at central government level, we've won central government contracts, and at the heart of that was sustainability. That was probably the number one factor. Climate action, sustainability, an equivalent to the BREEAM standard, that kind of thing was all central to that procurement process.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, a lot of what we do is for local authorities, and particularly local authority housing. And if we've been involved in negotiated preferred bidder opportunities or mini competitions in the last 6 months, say 20 to 30 bids, I would say 90% of those, it's climate action, carbon reduction has been absolutely at the heart of it. And that's it's generating some really exciting opportunities for us, such as some passive house homes, developing future homes and that kind of thing. But I think one of there's several drivers for it. I do think actually COVID, the pandemic, has been part of the driver for it, because as we can all remember, we were all getting radar charts of the impact of not travelling and us all moving to working from home and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the fact that we went 30, 40, 50 days without using coal-powered stations and all that kind of thing, I think it really did ironically give an opportunity to draw a lot more attention to that. Whilst obviously the pandemic's been a government priority as well, understandably. But I would say you can always look at things and say, is it perfect? Are they paying lip service to it? But I do believe this year the government have really stepped it up. There's the Green Industrial Revolution. The 10-point plans come out. We're hosting the COP26, and I do think another driver is the result of the American election as well, because Biden has just completely changed the language, and we all know that they're a big influencer in the world, and if America decides to move, the rest of the world typically does, and I think that's a factor as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can just see a sea change. Every single bid or client that we're talking to now is asking us about this. And the frameworks that are looking to renew, it's obviously central. So I just see a real change. We are going to do this now. We're serious about it. And even was it last week or the week before, the government have said that if you want to bid for a central government contract, then you must make a commitment to the net zero target. Fortunately, I'm sure you'll ask me about this a little bit. We have made a commitment to that already, so that's good news. And I just only see these things that come into central government filtering through quite rapidly, I think, into local government as well.
Yeah, I mean, well, like you've just mentioned there, I mean, if we move on a bit to about what we've been doing as an organisation, then I mean, I've kind of touched on very briefly the climate action framework. And you've mentioned obviously a lot of the tendering that's been kind of teasing out sustainability as a key aspect now. But what else have we been doing as an organisation? If could you say a bit about that and kind of put a bit of
Yeah, so I
context
mean,
to that?
yes, but the big the central focus is, as you said, we've launched our climate action framework, and you and me are working together on that to establish, and we've established now a climate action task force within the business. We've got several strands of that, but I mean, this year for us is all about becoming carbon aware as a business, measuring what our carbon footprint is. We're starting that process. We've invested in some software as well to help us do that, and that's being trialed on the passive house scheme that I mentioned, that we're going to be delivering soon for Mansfield District Council. So that's going really well, because by the end of the year we want to have that benchmark of where we are. We've already got our tree planting commitment that we've made, and we'll be planting some trees based on the amount of square metre building that we delivered last year. We've also, since I last spoke, we talked about the Future Home Standard. We've been working really closely with partners on a solution that will meet the 2025 standard today, and I think you can ask me something more about that. But in particular, our climate action framework now, we want to involve every aspect of the business, and the climate awareness in year one is also about working with our clients to understand what they need and helping them achieve their carbon reduction plans. But also, really importantly, two aspects really. We're not going to be able to do that without our supply chain. So we've now got a dedicated supply chain manager, and as well as all the commercial aspects of that, and the fair payment and building stronger relationships with our supply chain. It's also about engaging them with that whole agenda, because as an industry we can't innovate and we can't achieve these things without the supply chain. So there's a real big focus on it in our business, and it's at the heart of our plan. In 3 years' time, I think we're already on that journey. Really, we want to be a carbon reduction activist. We want to be net zero ready in year 5 of that plan. In 8 years' time, we're aiming to be carbon neutral, and then 10 years' time, the goal is to be a climate positive contractor with 0 single-use plastic, and on sites. And there's a lot of exciting things happening. Like, I was out the other day, and there'll be a video coming soon about the visit to Nottingham City Homes that I had, where 98% of our waste avoids landfill, and I had a really interesting tour there with our partner Enver waste partner, about exactly how they achieve that. And I mean, it's phenomenal that what they're doing there. So that just illustrates that kind of client supply chain contractor triangle, as I call it, because that
Yeah.
and we need to engage our site teams in it as well, which is something else I'm working on, because there's no single silver bullet for this guy, net zero by 2050, and the targets we've got to achieve by 2030. So
you've mentioned that focus from a tendering perspective around a focus on sustainability, and you sort of touched on there around our waste management and working with Enver. But in terms of the actual projects themselves, are we starting to see clients embracing more green technology in their own developments from their side as well?
yes, I mean, particularly in housing, but not exclusively in housing. I mean, there's already clients that we've worked with, like the University of Nottingham, for non-housing. I think in the last 12 months they were recognised as the world's 3rd most sustainable campus. So they've always had it at the heart of what they're doing. But what I've noticed, absolutely, it's coming into housing. Obviously about 60% of what we do is local authority affordable housing, and literally every single one of those clients now is saying, what are we going to do about these new building regulations? How are we going to get to that 2025? Because 2025 is not far away, is it? And
No.
no new build, there have to be 80%, 75% betterment on Part L in terms of carbon reduction, and there's got to be zero no gas boilers. So that's actually only 3.5 years away.
Yeah.
And differently to previous times, you might have several months to kind of implement this change, but at the moment, the regulation comes in, and you've got 9 months to adopt, whereas previously you might have 18 months to 2 years to make the change. So it's coming at us, fast.
I mean, you've mentioned there about the 2025 gen. It's probably a good kind of point to pick up on. You mentioned earlier about a product that we're looking at
Yeah,
for market that will kind of meet that demand now rather than waiting till when it's in force. So can you say a bit more around what that is and how that looks?
yeah. So we've been working with partners, and we've now, particularly through Bowls Over, because as part of the Bowls Over Homes program that we had, one of the pledges within that, the commitment we both made to each other, was that we would have a catalyst project that would deliver a future home. And I'm pleased to say we've submitted that scheme now for planning for a future home that will meet the 2025 standards now. So what that means is essentially it will be zero gas. It is a timber frame solution. It will achieve an 80% betterment on current building regulations. Importantly as well, it's actually going to be compared to a traditional build to meet the same standard, slightly more cost effective, but also, I mean, and a lot of that is to do with it being 20% faster to build as well. So
Yeah.
we've got a real site in for planning now, and for 19 units. So that'll be hopefully successful in getting planning permission around August, September, and we'll be on site in autumn. So you can certainly watch this space. There'll be a lot more about that, and actually we are planning an event around housing to give a real focus in September on what's happening in housing, sustainability, climate action, the future homes standards, and so on. So anyone who's interested in this and watch this video, just watch this space. We'll be publishing things around an event that we'd love people to, because again, like I said last time, it ultimately, to achieve this, it isn't about one body doing one thing and another being another. So we're very open to sharing that best practice, because we've got to make this shift as an industry. So we're going to be having an event to have, and there's other clients starting to make commitments and identify sites that they would like to maybe consider for this product. But now we want to get the conversation going across all local authorities. So we're going to, so they can share best practice, and we can all learn from each other to see how we get to this new standard.
Okay, I'm sure we can put a link in for people to register interest in that, or an email for people to register interest in that, if that's something. And I think as well, I mean, you touched on within that product, you mentioned timber frame, and I know when we spoke last year, we spoke about MMC within the client base. And I know that some of that's, well, quite a lot of that's been happening now over that last year. Can you tell us a bit more around what's been happening in terms of those modern methods of construction?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can see a shift. I mean, there's certainly one client that's gone full modular. I think what we're also finding is that there's many solutions, isn't there? And I suppose what we've come up with is a partial one, where it's partially off-site and partially on-site. But we're also looking to evolve that product to increase the percentage of off-site. I think there's a lot of appetite for it. Whether there's the volume that's needed for some of these, the full MMC, I think that's still a challenge, if I'm honest. I think future homes is the driver, sustainability is the driver. I can see things coming out of, we're all hearing now about skills shortages. So I think that'll also be a driver, but there's definitely an appetite for people to do things differently. And I also, though, wonder partly if we need to get away from this idea of calling it MMC, modern methods of construction, because that does kind of suggest that it's something new. And so we're also finding that we are having to, I don't know the quite way, I want to say break down barriers, but people have got genuine concerns about it, I would say.
It's a change, isn't it? It's changed traditional.
Yeah, and it's changed, and the fact that it is actually a building method that has been used for centuries, and actually before what we call traditional construction was used. But there's a lot of work to be done, and we are going to be doing some site visits, because at the moment we've got a site over in Northeast Derbyshire that's timber frame. We've got one in Newark that's both of those are market sale, one with a joint venture, one with a local authority housing company. We're about to complete one in Northamptonshire. We've completed 21 timber frame units at the front of our head office in Edwinstowe.
Yeah.
So timber frame, I think is the route we've chosen, but it's and what we're doing is it's an evolution, not a revolution. So it's kind of technology that we've already worked with and we know can deliver a quality product successfully, and then enhancing that to fit in with the whole future home standards. So I mean, you could argue that's not innovation because it's tried and tested, but what we're doing is developing it to make the best use of that. And I think one of the breakthroughs we've also made is because sometimes a barrier to MMC is, price, it's more expensive, etc. But a lot of the time the comparisons are done just on the superstructure, and you do a comparison. And on that level, it is a bit more expensive. But what you need to do really to understand whether MMC brings value is apply it to a real site. And when we did that, you could see that you then get the timescale benefits, the quality benefits. You apply everything, and there's still some things we're looking at like whole life cost benefits and so on. But until you actually apply it to some real sites, and then the next thing being a program of sites, that's when you'll really get the economies, and then it really starts to make sense, both I think commercially from a quality product perspective and actually from a sustainability and helping us towards net zero.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, in terms of whether it's timber frame, modern methods construction, whether it's traditional build, one of the commitments that we've sort of made within that framework is around reducing our impacts through construction. I suppose one of the things I want to ask from your perspective is how will introducing that framework help us achieve something that I suppose in the main we know we should be doing anyway? What difference will it make, and what will it bring?
Well, in terms of so I mean, obviously as part of our climate action plan, we've also signed up to the UK builders commitments around climate, and that means we have to bring into the mix the design stage to try and advise our clients to make the buildings that we deliver as sustainable as possible. So in terms of the impact that building has in use, in terms of the carbon footprint it generates, that's where it has an impact. But there's a lot more to it as well. So what we're building there is local supply chains. Because for me, one of the quick wins in terms of carbon is transport and travel. So we've developed this with a local supply chain. So that means by definition less traveling. So that helps to reduce the carbon footprint. So there's two ways in which it does. Is that I've understood what you were getting at, or
yeah, partly, and I think also what internally, I suppose, what sort of things do you think, I suppose culturally, will the climate action framework help change in terms of our own teams' approaches and how we use energy on site, for example, and things like that?
Yeah. I mean, obviously that's definitely going to be part of it. And it's interesting that you mentioned culture, and I think that's where we've got to start, which is why we've said, it is about raising awareness. There are a lot of quick wins for these kinds of things. And in fact, even today I've got a meeting with our senior site managers to look at exactly that. How can we, because inevitably the first start of it is about everybody just putting it at the forefront of their mind and asking, this is what I've always done, but is there a better way? Is there a better way? So, I'll be honest that there's just as part of our talking to, say, brick suppliers, we've been asking for them not to become wrapped in plastic. Now you find that some site people have then been asking the brick providers, why are you supplying them not wrapped? Could you supply them wrapped, please? So we've got some mindset changes to get it all joined up, which is only like any change that you bring in. So we're going to be doing a I probably haven't even told you about this yet, but me and you are probably going to be doing some road shows on site to get people on board, because you don't achieve this by just launching a climate action framework and then there you go, job's
No.
done. Everybody's on board. So it's about then having conversations, and for me it can be the tiny little things, like it's not that tiny actually, but your team have been working on digital O&M manuals and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And it's looking at, do we need to spend all that time producing all those documents in paper format, and the speed and the digital leadership aspect of it is really important, and how we use technology on site. So it's a massive thing. And
Yeah.
also looking at one of the things we've started looking at, which is, on the surface you've got a 3-year goal to be have an 100% electric fleet. But there's quite a lot to work on at that, and that involves engaging with site as well, and changing mindsets, and looking at how we manage our fleet differently potentially.
Yeah.
So we've certainly got to be prepared to change some working practices and change our mindset. And I think but we've started the journey.
Yeah, and I think part of what you just mentioned there kind of leads me on quite nicely to the kind of closing question I got, really, which was around the last time we spoke. We discussed around how at a personal and individual level, everyone's got to play their part. So the example you've just given of someone maybe not understanding why something's coming without the plastic wrap now is perhaps that person on their own journey not really understanding what that means. But what examples have you got where those individual and personal aspects have started to play into the overall plan? Have you got any examples of those
What, for me personally, or the
for
other
you personally, or
30
anything that you've
people?
seen around the business, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen, I suppose, I mean, me personally, just picking up on what I talked about last year, was when we talked, watching the video last night, that was at the stage where I still had a diesel vehicle. We had 2
Yeah.
cars. So I've made a transition to look at that. And we've got 1 car, one electric vehicle now, and so that's a shift we've made. But I can kind of see that by personal behavior, I think it's fairly well known that I'm an advocate of that. I suppose that's an example of how we can all make changes, and if we become advocates ourselves, it starts to change things. So I've had people walk up to me and ask me about that a lot, both externally and internally. And I've noticed some employees, they're not moving 100% electric, but they're moving to hybrid vehicles, for example.
Mhm.
Um, so that's one level. But also I've noticed, there's a lot of our young people, they've made real, you can tell it's really a personal commitment. Scott Wilkinson, the energy that he's put into the tree planting initiative,
Yeah.
and putting his hands up to the way the whole team have bought into helping us go in a very short space of time to implement a new piece of software that's going to help us measure the carbon footprint. So I think a lot of it is about, we've got some internal values of own it, achieve it, improve it, but you can really see people wanting to own this. So um, that's one area. I mean, have you seen anything, Tom? I can bounce it back to you. I know it's you
Well,
interviewing me, but
yeah,
I mean, what have you seen?
I mean, you've already touched on one, I suppose. One in particular I've seen within our team is, for example, there's been a tendency in the past to print off signage for sites and laminate them, which isn't particularly great using the plastic lamination pouches. So we're now looking at how to minimize those, get rid of signage that's not needed, for one, I suppose, is one aspect, but also then put some of that signage into a more permanent reusable material, and possibly even on recycled materials and things like that. You mentioned as well the digital O&M, which has always been something that the team's been quite passionate about. So they've been pushing on that and spoken to some of the clients, and we've managed to now digitize a few of those O&M folders, which traditionally would have taken up probably a couple of dozen large lever arch files. So yeah, you can see that it's all about those kind of little changes here and there, and people kind of looking at the bits that they can make and affect a change within, I suppose, and bringing it all
Yeah.
together.
And I think I've noticed there's just a lot of things that have happened kind of organically since we started this conversation, which we started this kind of last year, I suppose, but then we formally launched it this year. And But what we did with all our staff when we launched it was we've done, so we've got about 150, 160 people, and myself and the MD did a session with all of our staff in bite-sized chunks, and that started to get a lot of ideas going. But I mean, one of the things I think you just highlighted really is we do need to do is capture these tiny little things that are happening, because I do think it'll be tiny little steps. And I think as individuals, sometimes we can think, oh, this is just too massive. And obviously, if you think about it on a global level, of course it is. It's too big for just one person. But actually, if every single one of us can think of little things that we could do, and just an example of that being the team at Nottingham City Homes on the Eastglade site, there wasn't a directive from above that said we are going to go 100% renewable energy for our sites. They engaged with the electrical provider, the utilities provider, and did that themselves. And I think in a way they're the best stories, because they took that initiative. And so that site, which is a 2-year site, is going to be powered 100% by renewable energy. And our people did that. They took that on themselves because they thought it was important. And I think when that sort of thing starts to happen, you know things are starting to, both you and me, we're both passionate about making sure this is embedded in what we do. And I think that's the ultimate goal, which will take time. And obviously we've got some individuals that are going to move quickly on that, and then there'll be others that need. I think it's really important what you said as well. It's about people understanding why it's important, why we need to do this. I think that's both at an individual, global and business and national level sort of thing. What's the impact?
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely the biggest piece is going to be around those, like you say, those little steps and bringing everyone along, which will be at different pace for different people. It will depend where they're at within their own sort of journey. But I suppose really I am conscious that we probably need to wrap up, and really it is such a massive topic. I mean, some of the things we've covered, we could do a separate session on electric fleet. We could do a separate session on the 2025 product. There's whole different episodes I think we could do around various aspects of it, and we may well do. But I suppose in terms of a call to action for anyone that's watching this, if you want to understand more about what we're doing as a business, please get in touch. And drop us a line, get in touch if you want to know more about what we've discussed today. But for now, I'd like to thank Glenn again for joining me, and we'll speak to you next time. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And look out for that event in September, which will just pull everything together that Tom just talked about. So good. Thank you.
Thank you.